All right, hello everybody, and welcome to the first day of winter here in the Northern Hemisphere, which is, definitely where I'm stuck in Manitoba. And you know what that means? Well, if you're a regular viewer of my channel, you know what that means. That means I'm about to start my crunch time on my garden planning, and I figured I'd bring you guys along. Up here in the den, we're gonna actually make use of this blackboard that I got so huffed putting on the wall here, and I'd kind of show you what I've got in mind for right now. It's as with most things in my garden, it's undoubtedly going to evolve and change, but I do have a couple of basic ideas that I really want to explore this year. So we're going to start off with basic garden outline. You know that weird little potato box we built? So that's kind of off to the side. Then we've got the chaos garden like here. This is obviously not to scale, right? And I hope it's showing up in the camera. Well, maybe I'll just try and make that a little more bold. Should use the big chalk for this. Yeah, okay. Use the bigger. What have I got here? Switching to pink. So we got the chaos garden here. Little potato box here. That was our carrot patch for the last couple of years. Then we've got the bunker garden we put in kind of here. And then this year's sister patch was here. We kind of got the pepper patch here. And there were those weird little potato box things kind of there. So that's a basic outline of what my garden looks like, right? We got the cherry tree here and the pear tree here. No wonder people think my garden's a little chaotic in town. That is a little messed up. But if you look at it from this kind of overhead perspective, you can see all these lawn areas that we kind of just use to walk through, and it keeps me from wandering onto the soil anywhere near as much. So hopefully I'm helping to prevent a little compaction in my garden. I don't know. There's still so much that I've got to learn in this process, right? But so what I'm thinking for next year, because this was a non-effective garden this year, this was non-effective, this was mostly weeds aside from all the strawberries it killed over here. The bunker garden did okay with the peppers, but that's definitely not the best crop that it's had going. This was a dismal failure. This sister's garden I think was my biggest failure of 2019. So disappointing. I got so little out of the corn. I mean, what we did get out of it tasted fantastic, right? It was very, very juicy and very sweet, and that's exactly what I'm looking for in a sweet corn. But most of it ended up feeding the chickens because they were just little and stunted, and baby corn is nice, but it's not what I was growing for there. The pepper patch was probably my biggest success. Well, the back portion of it anyway, with all those lemon habaneros, those really, really did well for me. And I'm gonna have lemon habs in the garden, I think, next year. I do have some seeds kind of set aside. So, yeah. All right, hopefully that's not too loud and annoying on there. Anyway, so with next year's garden, this chaos garden area here, I'm still gonna kind of work on, I've got that log sunken in here and those bits of log sunken in over here where I killed all of the strawberries last year. But I think I'm gonna leave this patch in the middle flat. I am gonna put, hopefully, I am gonna put another chunk of log in to finish that one side. But this is just going to be, I'm leaving this to see what grows there. We'll do the whole patch, just this. That whole swath there in the middle is going to be weeds and unintentionals and whatever, because that fed the chickens so well over the last growing season that I really just don't want to mess with it. It's worth it to me in saved chicken feed just to let that grow wild. Plus, it's really fun seeing what pops up in there. I mean, we had a few different types of grasses, and there was a white shard that popped up in there, or I guess it's called a silver shard. But yeah, that's probably going to be a little bit wild. This failed sisters patch is probably going to be the pepper garden next year. So, that being one of the successes from this year, I am going to continue to space them out. Maybe a little bit more space than I gave them last year, because there was a little bit of, well, I'm going to say too much light competition, is probably the best way to put it. That said, I am going to interplant in between the peppers with assorted herbs and little things. I'm going to do, this winter I'm going to spend a lot of time looking into companion gardening, because that's what I want to do with the sisters patches anyway, right? Ultimately that's companion gardening. And that's kind of what I wanted to talk about today, because I've mentioned the Lonely Sisters garden in a couple of my previous videos, and a few of you are probably wondering what the heck that is. That's going to be the potato bunker over here. I'm going to trim down those bits of branches that are sticking out the top. We might use the chunks of sod that are still kind of sitting by the pepper garden here to build up another layer on that. But I don't want to mess with it too much, because in the past we've had garter snakes move into that, and where there are garter snakes there aren't slugs. So this is a winning situation to me. So if they've got a nice home in there, I don't want to mess with it too bad. However, I do want to use this as productive garden space, because it's supposed to be productive garden space, right? So in the Lonely Sisters garden, I'm going to be looking up corn as my main crop, and basically planting all of the suggested companions in there with it, but there will only be one of each type of plant. I'm a little worried about how that's going to work, because they say, you know, with corn you need to do your 4 rows right beside each other so that the wind can knock it around and it can get good pollination and everything. I don't know, hopefully that's showing up for you. And just putting in one single corn plant, you know, it doesn't seem like that's going to do it. But what I noticed with this patch this year is, with the corn being so close together, they never developed any real stem strength. So when the wind blew, it just knocked them down. So I'm kind of thinking, over by itself, it should have no choice but to develop a stronger stem, and in and of itself, that should make for a healthier plant. I'm not sure about the whole wind pollination dropping it straight down, so I may have to use a couple of Eric Hale's tricks there to just kind of pollinate it myself, and that I think will work just fine. I'm worried about a single squash plant, because that's not a lot of squash flowers to try and pollinate itself with. So that's got a lot of potential to go wonky on me. I'll probably end up with a pepper in there. I'll probably end up with at least one type of bean. I'm thinking bush bean this year. Runner beans were a lot of fun, you know, and they were really pretty, and they brought the hummingbirds in, and I like all that stuff. But in the end, I didn't get to eat anything off of that entire row. I didn't consume a single bit of produce. So that doesn't work for me. String beans, bush beans, whatever. I think those will be what I'm using for my beans this year. So there'll be a bean in here. There'll be a pea in here, because it's similar yet different. I might throw, you know, like a turnip in there. I'm gonna, like I say, I want to go through a few different companion gardening sites, make myself a list of everything it says to put with corn, and I'm going to try and make a secondary list of what the various sites say to not put with corn. Make sure this is not near your corn plant, because I know I've probably shot myself in the foot on more than a few of these garden experiments by having plants together that just aren't, they're not going to interact well. So in the Lonely Sisters garden, I'm going to just mash that full of as many different varieties as I can, but only one of each variety. And I'm hoping that that will wake up the soil biology that's there, and they'll do that, you know, mycorrhizal fungi thing that I keep talking about on the pasture stuff. And I can hopefully get a more bountiful crop through this. And from what I've heard with the diversity in croplands, it helps with droughts. So hopefully I won't have to water this as much either. That'll be really, really interesting to see the results from this year. Like I say, the Chaos Garden is still the Chaos Garden. This carrot patch, okay, so I heard last year and a couple years before that too, that radishes and carrots planted together, it's a great idea, you end up with more abundance. That is not how things turned out in my garden. So we're not going to be repeating that experiment, especially not in this little patch of grass or soil. It used to be grass. I do, however, think I am going to continue to run carrots in here, but one thing I've read is that carrots love tomatoes. So I'm thinking maybe 4 or 5, however many it works out to by, you know, planting season. I'll put my tomatoes along the back here, because they're not going to shade anything except the Chaos Garden, and this is all chicken food, so no real concern there. And we'll have the opportunity to see how carrots in front of tomatoes do, because last year in the pepper garden we had that one tomato that was planted with that parsley. Well, it kind of volunteered itself up in that parsley. And that parsley is actually still growing outside under a cloche. I looked at it yesterday, and I had to knock the little bits of snow off the top little vent hole. But there is still vibrant dark green in the base of that. So that's fascinating, but I've heard you shouldn't grow carrots and parsley together. So next year it's going to be tomatoes with the carrots, and we're going to see how that works. Because yeah, this multi-planting really worked out well. In the case of that tomato, it gave us a decent amount of fruit, and in the case of the parsley, it gave us a lot of parsley. We probably got like $10 grocery price worth of parsley out of that. So if that's not a garden win, I don't know what is. Back to the sister stuff though, because we talked about this patch, we've talked about this patch. Let's go back to the bunker here, because this is one of the first gardens that we built. For those of you who are not familiar, the bunker garden that I refer to is a raised bed sod built garden. We literally dug up chunks of the grass, we played with it like Lego, we stacked it up, we dug up, I think it might have been this garden first. We grabbed some of its sod chunks, we made it up, and it's been growing for us ever since. I initially tried sisters gardening in this, and we had some pretty interesting results. You may recall, or if you're new to the channel, you may want to go back a few seasons to, I think it was our first season out here, so that would be the 2016 garden season. But I had corn along the back of this, and then we had peas and beans and 3 different types of squash, I believe. And it seems to me that this was our most productive year for squash. They just kind of grew off the side, they grew off the side, they took up this space in front here, and that is excellent use of solar energy, in my opinion, because this area was maximized not only in the bunker garden, but around it. So that also meant less lawn to mow, which also works for me. So we know that historically, a sense of the sisters garden will work in the bunker. But again, the biggest problems that I had were my corn were planted right on top of each other, so they didn't really have any strength. There was not a lot of cob development, and because they were weak, and this is the north field, our wind just blasts this way through the garden, right? Like it, and I'm talking blasts through here. So the corn ended up flopped over in a couple of our major windstorms. It didn't work. So similar to the Lonely Sisters garden, up in the bunker, I'm going to do small numbers, but, slightly more of them. Maybe 5 corn in this situation, maybe, 5 beans. Maybe I'll do 1 set of squash over here, 1 set of squash over there. Leave it a little spaced out, but I do want to try and squeeze as many companion plants into that space as I can, because it has done very, very well, and I would like to have more squash, right? The one thing that's going to kill me is trying to make sure that these are all the same squash plants growing around in my assorted sisters gardens, because I've heard that they can cross-pollinate really easily. And now maybe one of you fine viewers can let me know, is that something that's going to express itself in the current year's fruiting, or is that something that's going to express itself in if you try and replant those seeds? Because if it's a replanting the seed expression, then I don't care. I'll put in acorn squash over here, I'll put in some of those racer pumpkins over here, and I'll be putting sugar pie pumpkins in here, plus undoubtedly way over, kind of like down over here where Shox's fairy garden is, she'll have some spaghetti squash going if I don't, I'm sure, because we love squash around here. But if it's going to express itself in this year's fruit, I really should just pick one, and we buy the rest. So gardener struggles are real, I guess. So that takes care of the Bunker Sisters garden. Down here in what was the Sisters garden, this is going to be the pepper patch. Like I said, we're going to space it out very similar to what it was last year, but maybe a little bit more space in between the plants. And then I'm going to try and find some just low-level mini shrub type herbs. I think are probably going to be the best way to go. There will be mulch in here, but it's easy enough to plant things through that, right? You just dig a little hole in there and you put it in. Good to go. Like I've got all this oregano here. I could do another batch of oregano, maybe plant them in between a few of them, and some parsley in between a few of them, because parsley or peppers and tomatoes, kind of similar. So maybe if it did so well with the tomato here, maybe it will do well with the various peppers that I'm trying to grow as well, because ultimately this is about trying to have a productive garden, right? Turning what used to be lawn into food for our family. And yeah, y'all, if you saw our young Fuzzy and his fiance when we did one of those last hot pepper tastings, you can tell that girl is a tank when it comes to hot peppers. She's definitely one of us. And yeah, we're gonna need to have more growing if we're gonna satisfy our growing family. Now, that leaves us with what was the pepper patch this year. And the potato area. I think we're kind of going to use this potato area either for squash, or we might try potatoes again. But this really worked out well with our dollars. Yeah, I think it was $1 on clearance bag of seed potatoes, you know, way later than anybody should be planting them. We only just finished eating up the last of the potatoes that we harvested the other day, which, you know, is tragic because that means we don't have them to go with turkey today. But it is what it is. We could always go out and buy potatoes if we really needed them. In this version of the Sisters Garden, I am going to be having ridiculous spacing in between. Like my corn plants probably going to be, you know, 1.5 to 2 feet apart. They're going to seem just hugely overspaced, and I'm definitely going to throw in as many of the various companion herbs as I can. In the middle here, I'm going to have probably 3 large squash plantings. Again, you know, we're going to try and have some herbs in there. We're going to have the corn well spaced on the side, but we're probably only going to run corn in 2 rows on this, because we have, I think it's about 8 to 10 feet from side to side on the garden. So I'm curious to see, you know, what the pollination is going to be like between, there's a single corn stalk here, there are staggered corn stalks here, and there are 2 broad rows of corn stalks here. Yeah, I'm just very curious to see how that's going to work out. And this feels like it's going to waste a lot of space, but at the same time, I'm also going to be throwing in like beans, you know, here, and throwing in peas and just random things to fill that space, because I do want mulch on my ground, because I want to check evaporation and I want to stop weeds growing from my intended garden spaces. They're more than welcome to grow here, you know, absolutely thrilled if they just grow in abundance. And some of the dandelions that came out of this patch last year, like her leaves as long as my arm on those things, the chickens loved it. And you know that's ripping full of minerals and nutrients and stuff that they're just not getting in their chicken food. So that, I am perfectly content to build my hugel mounds slowly over time and let the middle of that area feed my chickens. The potatoes, last year we kind of grew them, and it was like aged leaves, some chicken poo, and a little bit of the landscaping compost, which I know we probably shouldn't have used, but neither one of us went to the hospital from those potatoes, so I guess it worked out okay. We've got kind of a pile of that left, and for the most part, they didn't really go into the hard packed soil. They just kind of grew on it. They did dissolve the boxes that all of this stuff was piled in, but they didn't really go too far into the ground, so it was really easy to harvest those. I'm kind of thinking what I would like to do is see if we can get our hands on maybe some oat straw bales or some wheat straw bales, and like flake them apart, maybe even in a new section. We'll say maybe, now this is all gray area here, so I feel like I should be using a different chalk. Let's go green for this. But maybe put in kind of a straw-based potato patch in front of this area here, and build it up a little bit higher than this potato patch was, so that we get even less going into the ground, and it should be even easier to harvest our potatoes out of it. But the thing with the straw bale gardening is you've got to really prep that. You got to put your high nitrogen fertilizers and stuff in there, and it kind of seems like it's a bit of a pain, but at the same time it seems like it's a brilliant idea. So y'all know sooner or later I'm gonna be giving this a try. I know a lot of farmers and ranchers. It really shouldn't be that hard for me to find a bale of straw, especially one that is, you know, considered leftover and or garbage come spring. So we'll see how that works. That's a potential, that's a hopefully, but we'll see. Now back over here though, because I am planning on rather a lot of peppers this year. Quelle surprise. I'm thinking we're probably going to need to dig up a new patch kind of in front of the potato bunker, going over to the side of this one here, because I like my little walkways like I was saying earlier, right? And just kind of tying it all in this way. And I may end up putting more peppers in here. It really all depends on how the space works out and how this AeroGarden does for me, because really I got amazing results from this last year, and that I honestly do think that's what led to my pepper garden success. So I will be doing my best to maximize its potential for me. I'll be getting started with some of those seeds from JR, and then I think we'll be doing the super hot raffle. Well, it's not really a raffle, it's that roulette, the roulette wheel thing, and just see what randomly comes up in that. And then I've got 2 big batches that I want to plant of the red cherry bombs that I got from my coworker, and the lemon habaneros that did so well for me. Now I want to have those lemon habs going by, I think I planted them in February last year, so probably March at the absolute latest, because they probably could have been started a month later. So I'm going to have to get started probably in the next couple of days, taking herb cuttings out of this Black AeroGarden Classic, filling whatever pods I still have left in there, and getting started on some of those seeds from JR. So if you watched the mail call video, please let me know down in the comments below if there's any of those particular varieties you'd like to see me give a go. There's no point in voting for the Chocolate Reaper, because that one is already guaranteed to go into that sucker. I got to give it a try, you know. If it grows, it's going to hurt like a jeepers, but I've got to give it a try. So anyway, I think that pretty much wraps up my, we'll call it a rough draft of the plan for the 2020 garden. And yeah, I'm really excited to see how these 3 different variations of the companion gardening or sisters gardening work out for me. I'm really excited to see how this pepper patch is going to work, because it's based on what I did last year, and last year seemed to work, except I'm adding a little bit of companion planting theory to it. So hopefully it should work better. There's a lot of faith and a lot of trust in that. I'm really excited to check out this carrots and tomato patch over here, because garden fresh tomatoes, right? Like really go buy a tomato at the grocery store, go pick one from your vine. You're never going to be happy with a grocery store tomato again. We all know it. Those of us who garden, we know, right? So this should be really exciting, because I've had some incredibly productive tomatoes, even though the light is very limited in this area because of those stupid spruce trees that I still haven't taken down, because they shade, you know, like 3 hours of shade right there. It's quite brutal. But I've still gotten some really good tomato numbers out of that area. And I'm really, you know, each year we seem to be kind of expanding. You know, next year we'll probably move another chunk down here and another chunk. And yeah, as the years go by, that whole side yard's eventually going to turn into garden, and it's going to be absolutely fantastic. And hopefully it will be nicely edged by a lot of these, more permanent plantings, right? Looking for perennials, looking for long-term food production. I've got those Hascat berries. Oh, I love those Hascat berries, right? Especially those really plump ones that come off the shorter bush. So that one only gets to be like, I think 3 or 4 feet tall and 3 or 4 feet around. It's not a huge plant. Might be 6 at the absolute most. The other one's supposed to get like 8 to 12 feet around, I think. 8 to 10 feet around. I haven't seen the tags in quite a while, so I may have to look them up again at this point. But yeah, putting those around the edging, you know, like maybe here and here, and filling in the spots with the trees. I'm really excited to see how that pear tree does that we got home in the car. I still can't believe we shoved that thing into a little Ford Fusion, but we did it. We got it home, and it's supposed to have 3 different type of pear on there, which means it doesn't need an additional pollinating pear, because it's got 3 different types of pear. All right, hopefully that's a real good thing. We know the cherry tree did well for us last year. I don't think I got around to getting any good images of the cherry production from that, but I can safely assure you we enjoyed them wholeheartedly. They were delicious. And I'm hoping they'll continue to get a little bit larger in coming years, because I've read in a few different places that when fruit trees initially begin developing fruit, they're going to be small comparatively to their standard production. So yeah, I'm very excited for that. Next up, I think we need to get plum trees, just kind of a standard American plum, because that's a self-pollinating one, and the standard Canadian plum, because that also is self-pollinating. So I'm going to keep my eyes out for those. Be nice to add a tree every year if I can. It's good to have garden goals, permaculture goals in particular, especially when you're looking to hand the property down to your kids in the future, because it's always nice to know your kids got food, right? Anyway, on that note, I want to wish you all a very happy, I hope you had a very blessed solstice yesterday, and a wonderful Yule season ahead of you. I hope you have a Merry Christmas, wonderful, I wish you all peace and joy and abundance regardless of what you're celebrating, because you know what? You deserve it. You've been a good person this year. I'm sure you have. And if you disagree with me, well, you know, remember, teacher's always right. I get the blackboard. That makes me teacher today. So you deserve good things. Remember that. All right, everybody. I love you. And no, I guess there's still one more Sunday in 2019. So we'll see what I do with that one. Take care, everybody.